Let's talk about Aurora. Aurora is the newest mage coming to League of Legends, a pseudo-assassin who emphasizes mobility and supplementary DPS rather than the CC and mobile zone control characteristic of most previous mages. As usual, I got together with my community to test Aurora, experimenting to learn as much as possible pre-release so you can jumpstart your own learning. In this video, we will cover Aurora's abilities, ability usage, skill order, purpose and playstyle, viable roles, itemization, and runes. Aurora's passive is a typical 3-hit passive that grants her healing and movement speed. Aurora's attacks and abilities apply a stack to enemies. The third stack deals bonus % max HP magic damage. If her target was a champion, then Aurora performs an exorcism, gaining both a spirit and the Realm Hopper effect. Spirits grant Aurora healing over time, and she can have at most 4. Realm Hopper grants % movement speed for the duration of the buff, scaling with the number of spirits Aurora holds. Exorcisms refresh the duration of Realm Hopper and of all active spirits. Aurora's Q is a linear skill shot that deals magic damage to all targets hit, marking them with a curse. After a delay, Aurora can recast the spell to cause bolts to fly from all cursed targets towards Aurora. Bolts deal the same base damage as the initial cast, increased based on their target's % missing HP. Bolts will pierce their targets, dealing reduced damage for subsequent hits. Aurora's W is a short-range dash that grants her invisibility and Realm Hopper. Aurora enters stealth after the dash, so if you use it to bounce over a wall, you can still be seen. Attacking or casting spells ends stealth, and takedowns will reset W. For a stealth spell, this is very simple. Aurora's E is a linear skill shot that deals magic damage to all targets hit, applying a substantial decaying slow and knocking her backwards. This spell has a short cast time which she can use to buffer into CC, and its range is a little longer than the effect would indicate. Aurora's R, her most wordy spell, is a dash that creates a circular rift. On cast, Aurora gains Realm Hopper, while her rift deals magic damage to all enemies hit, applying a non-decaying slow. Once the rift is fully active, its borders will trap Aurora and her enemies inside. If Aurora touches the border, then she dashes to the opposite side of the rift. If an enemy touches the border, they are knocked towards the rift's center and slowed significantly. Aurora and her enemies can interact with the rift's borders any number of times, but you can blink over the border without colliding with it. While the rift is active, the effects of Realm Hopper are doubled. Aurora may recast her ultimate to immediately close the rift, and it will close automatically if Aurora leaves the area. Aurora's ability usage principles are just as straightforward as the abilities themselves. Your Q has a small lockout period until you can recast it, but in general, you want to stagger the 2 casts longer than that. Doing so optimizes burn uptime, prolongs presence of mind, and allows your teammates time to optimize your missing health damage. The exception is, of course, in a very close low HP versus low HP duel where seconds matter. Your E, offensively, is a spell that you cast only to end your trades. You can take your quick QBQ combo, or you can keep pressing forwards with W, getting as much value out of your passive as possible, then using E's range at the end. In fact, Aurora's damage always revolves around her passive and Q, giving you the freedom to hold your W and E for defensive or evasive repositioning. If you can juke a mage's key spell by pressing W forwards, you're almost always going to win that auto duel. Now you can EW, but this loses hard on spacing to enemy mobility. In the right context, you're better off casting E-Flash. And you can dash over terrain with E, but only if the wall is very small. It doesn't work in a lot of places around the map, so hold your W for escapes. The spell that demands the most attention is your ultimate. If you want to dash right away, click backwards as soon as the cast ends. If trapping an enemy with the border sooner is important, range permitting, you can dash sideways rather than forwards. If you just need to get over large walls or get out of your situation at all costs, dump that ultimate for mobility. As the game goes on, Aurora's raw Q burst will start to fall off, so she'll start to rely more on her ultimate, which starts to nuke everyone. Seriously, don't be afraid to cast the spell just for its damage if you clearly don't need to reposition. It just kills things. That said, I hope it's obvious that the ultimate is the most important spell for Aurora's playmaking. So if you can rely on your DPS patterns rather than blowing your ultimate, do hold the cooldown. Now, here's a quick set of strings and combos. For laning, your early short trade is Q auto Q, but do use as many autos as you can before recasting Q. Your shortest spell rotation is Q EQ, using E's animation to hide the Q cast at the cost of exiting the trade, and this is also your core wave clear. You can extend the range and surprise enemies with a WQEQ short trade, you can punish enemies for contesting riskier space with QEWQ, and you can mix in your ultimate for a cheeky assassination at Aurora's greatest possible range. So far so simple, and Aurora's skill order is no different. If all of your trades revolve around Q, then you're maxing Q. It's the best damage for your skill points with the best possible cooldown. And if W only extends its stealth duration by a tiny amount, then naturally E is the spell we want to max second. Aurora levels Q, E, W, no expected variations. Although at level 2, I do think it's far better to take W over E. The maneuverability it grants just makes it so much easier to trade against virtually every target, with the possible exception of short-ranged no-threat champions like Vladimir. Aurora is a highly mobile burst mage who leverages her excellent dueling to find a dive-centric snowball. She is a beatdown champion with very abusive early damage and excellent access to that damage, not to mention the sheer power of her ultimate. Her 1v1 strength is very high, and since the range of her wave clear pattern is so limited, it's that 1v1 power alone which should generate wave control for her. From there, roam or harass under tower to generate easy post-6 tower dives. Aurora can afford to play up, either in her own lane or in the mid-game side lane, a lot more than other mages because she's so annoyingly slippery. And that strength is what enables her to play flanks the way Ahri does, setting up teamfights with her giant area nuke. But she is not immortal. While she may have tons of backward kiting tools, she has to be a little scared of trading cooldowns in anything greater than 1v1 because she'll start losing hard to Ghost, Slows, or other movement speed steroids, not to mention reliable CC. The price Aurora pays for her mobility is her fragility if caught, since she won't have enough time to get her healing online. With such a simple base kit, the area that demands the most attention while learning Aurora is her positioning. Knowing when to dash forwards, hang back, look for flanks or play behind frontline. Knowing how to optimize your R borders, which cooldowns you have to respect and which you can trade with your mobility. Knowing how to take risks around your stealth and resets. That's what makes a good Aurora player. And those are the elements that must be felt and understood rather than explained. My own mistakes were playing too passively. This is a champion you really need to limit test on. To be honest, we didn't have enough time to get a strong feel for Aurora's power curve into the late game, and it's weird since her ultimate breaks our expectations. On her base kit, Aurora looks like a champion whose burst damage starts to fall off as the game goes on, which could be a real weakness since she's a high purity carry without as much utility as other mages. But then her ult deals so much damage, burning flashes so consistently that her sole weaknesses might be range and durability. So figuring out exactly how snowball dependent Aurora is, and how hard, if at all, she falls off, is going to be a major area to focus on post-release. I do expect her to need to leverage her beatdown power. Let's talk lane phase and roles. I expect Aurora's most played role to be mid, a role in which she tends to dash forwards to break range disadvantages while avoiding enemy skill shots. Mid lane limits the windows in which Aurora can actually be caught by the jungler, while giving her access to more of the map for ultimate tower dives. Her poor matchups here are champions that outrange her while also threatening her with superior burst, superior auto DPS, or defensive mobility spells preventing her from taking agency. We expect Lucian and Corki to be tough but playable, while Jace is projected to be her absolute hardest lane. Still, I would not be surprised to see her be blind pick viable in this role. But Aurora also seems to be plenty viable in the top lane, albeit only as a counterpick. In that role, she's a lot more likely to hold her W and E until her enemy tries to make a move on her, similar to how Quinn beats down her enemies. Thanks to her percent max health damage and gross backwards mobility, Aurora is oppressive in the extended 1v1 against most melees. In fact, the only reason I'm advocating for her counterpick only status is her damning weakness to ghosts down the long lane. Otherwise, she passes the Renekton test and seems like the easiest top lane mage to just lock in freely. Aurora only has two important level-dependent elements, her passive and her ultimate duration. Beyond those, her Q is really the only spell that needs points urgently, and that means we can consider the option of Aurora bot or support. I'm sure her damage is high enough to make it work, though her 2v2 is harder to navigate than her 1v1, and there's more marksmen that can punish her effectively than there are mages. At the end of the day, if you're a solo queue player, then you're probably okay to let Aurora scale, but if you're a competitive player, then you really want her winning lane, so make of that what you will. Unfortunately, we were so close to Aurora releasing with a strong jungle clear, but now it looks like there's little reason to even try making her thrive in that role. Her snowball doesn't look nearly consistent enough for how slowly she's clearing. Aurora's itemization is a lot more open than many of her burst mage peers. Remember that her pattern has DPS opportunities, note Q's synergy with burns, and then realize that Aurora really doesn't seem to lose much overall damage from opting out of pen and into higher durability options. I believe her core stats are raw AP and haste rather than MPen, so that gives us two core build philosophies. The first, optimizing burn and burst, opts into orthodox mage items like Blackfire, Liandry's, Cryptbloom, Deathcap, or, in Aurora's case, even Lichbane if she's expecting a very low MR game. The second, intended for top lane, optimizes pure DPS into durability with options like Rod of Ages and even Riftmaker. Both philosophies are obviously drawn from the same pool of items, and honestly, you could probably just rush Seraphs for either one just for the shield. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, and no, Nashor's is not good on Aurora. Haste will do so much more in terms of her DPS. If you are the type of person who likes the for fun off-meta approach though, sure, you can build an attack speed core. In fact, Runons might have some bizarre niche usage late into AP builds, but it's not worth succumbing to that brain rot this early in her lifespan. For runes, Aurora is very well supported by Electrocute. All of her trades aim to proc her passive anyway, which leads to an Electrocute proc. Paired with Presence of Mind, Sudden Impact, and Legend Haste, you have a strong generalist rune page for almost every situation. Alternatively, if you need support in your spacing for a hard matchup, I really like Fleet Footwork's movement speed, especially since it grants access to more precision minor runes. I've seen some players experimenting with Conqueror, Phase Rush, and Arcane Comet, which may have some merit, but which I expect to be poorer in practice than the runes above. Just stay away from Hail of Blades. Electrocute will perform better for the phases of the game that matter most to Aurora. So that's Aurora, the Witch Between Worlds. When I first saw this kit, I expected that we'd be dealing with a skirmisher-style mage, almost marksman adjacent. I did not expect that we were actually getting a burst mage assassin hybrid with viable DPS patterns. And I know that I usually don't comment on projected power levels in these videos, but Aurora seems pretty strong. So if we're most likely seeing a lot of her in the future, it's going to be important that we keep refining our counterplay. If you learned anything new about Aurora, please leave it in the comments below to help everybody else learn. I hope I was able to help you prepare to hop between worlds when Aurora releases. Thank you for watching.